Hey, and welcome to this week's edition of Get Found, a weekly series dedicated to talking about all things kind of marketing, digital strategy, content, sales, and whatever else we deem worthy, whether you do or not. This week on the show, I've got Steve Farnsworth joining me, and Steve is going to introduce himself and tell you why it is that he chooses to put up with this abuse.
uh, that's a great question. I think it's for all the chicks, because it's doing a podcast, chicks. I'm Steve Farnsworth. I'm the CMO for the Steveology Group. We actually create content for B2B companies that help create demand and interest and awareness and bring you all kinds of leads. So that's what I do. And why am I here? Again, chicks.
I mean, ladies love good podcasts.
You know what? It's like, hey, I have a podcast. Women are like flies on honey. I'm just saying.
I mean, I've got 3 and the chicks flock to me constantly. So this week we're actually talking about data capturing hacks to get kind of internal information to boost your marketing and sales efforts. We're going to try to stick to the topic. It kind of dovetails off some stuff we were discussing last week and some kind of after the show chat that we had about, like why people aren't really mining a lot of this information that they already have access to inside their organization. Because, there really is just kind of this wealth of data that people have inside their own organization. And I think a lot of times we're kind of really looking externally at, how do we go get more information? How can we analyze what else is going on out there when we're not really focused kind of internally? So let's kick it off and talk kind of about, why this is important for starts. And then let's get into some tips.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have to say, Erin, that a fairly common conversation I have with folks. Really, one of the things about technology, there are really a lot of really smart folks in it, and it's really kind of an honor to work with these people. But sometimes often I'll sit down in meetings and ask them questions about what they're doing in terms of their marketing activities. And when you start talking about what audience are they really serving, they always have an answer. But when you start to dig into like how they came up with that answer, or what audience they're doing for a specific activity, sometimes you find out that they haven't really thought it through or thought about it at all. And often they're very surprised at it. And so what, kind of when we were talking is like, how can we look at some of this data, look a little better data, if you have a business intelligence software, and there are a lot of really great open source and free ones out there, you can get started if you're not already using that. But what's some data that marketers can help extrapolate to help learn more about who their customers are, who their targets are, where they can better use their marketing dollars. And that's what we're talk about, a couple little hacks that we both share that people should be doing or adopting.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much overlooked information that I think that, a lot of it goes back to one of the things we were touching on last week, which is, interdepartmental sharing, kind of like fighting for credit over things, talking about, is this information usable or not usable? And a lot of that, whether it's usable or not usable isn't whether or not the actual information itself is usable. It's about whether or not it's in a format that somebody can actually do something with, or would ever even recognize that that's like actually a thing. So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on today for my kind of tip and trick situation is I always talk about creating content groups and keyword groups. And today I'm going to focus kind of specifically on content groups because I think that where you can really help yourself out a lot is if you create content groups, especially if you set up kind of content rules where things will just like funnel automatically into these groups, based, whether you add new content or not. Is that you can do it by, and there's 2 separate ways I think that people need to do this. The first is by things that like actually match your needs, like solutions, common questions, products or features, audience types, things like that, right? And you can do all of those, right? So like you don't actually have to just do one. You can actually do a group around solutions that you have or common questions or audience pain points. You can also do a group around like features and things like that. And then as your content, and that includes all content, right? So it's not just your marketing landing pages and your, specific marketing copy. It's everything. It's support materials, it's FAQs, it's white papers, case studies. It's everything you've got goes into these groups. Then the second group you need to create is a content type group. And this is stuff like blog post, white paper, case study, video, whatever it is. once this stuff is grouped, the thing that you can actually do then when you're gathering data from other organizations, let's say your customer success and support team, you can actually see specifically which of these categories they're sending out more frequently or they are using most frequently, right? So like, let's say what you notice is that they're using one particular group of content around a specific solution or feature. This actually tells you that they're getting asked those questions the most frequently, or that they're dealing with things that require that kind of content really regularly. So now you know. And then the second group where you're actually looking at things by type is you can actually take that grouping and take that cross section and say, hey, it looks like they're actually sending out video content a lot. I'd really like to know why. Is it because it actually performs better? Is that like what really seems to be resonating with folks? Or, oh, they're sending out kind of this ebook or, something like this. And then you can talk to them about, like, hey, are you sending this out because it actually seems to perform best? Or are you sending it out because it's the only thing you have around this and you actually want more content around this topic in different formats? This gives you a lot of kind of jumping off points from internal stuff. And that same kind of digging in situation works really well for sales. Like you can see that kind of information for what sales is using, for what product is using, for what each location or region is doing, like are certain regions really heavily utilizing certain content differently than others. So that's kind of internal data that you can grab a hold of.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things in there that make a lot of sense for sure. I think that, when you're talking about tracking the kinds of content, I've talked about this before, and it's even one of the notes I want to share is like when you create content via links that you're sharing with sales, if you don't know what a UTM tag is, go learn it. They're really super easy to learn. UTM tags, they're basically ways of creating a URL that tells you exactly where that piece is and what it's from and the campaign. Gives you a lot of data you can track in Google Analytics. So definitely do that. At least if you're not going to do a UTM and use Google Analytics, at least use like a customized short URL that you can track usage, because you really want to see which pieces are being used the most. The other thing which I would go into is, again, like Erin was saying, is like in terms of really kind of what are the needs of sales. The other place you can help dig additional information out is like create like maybe offer, I would do it in a time fixed thing because salespeople's attentions are kind of small, but salespeople write letters all the time, especially for complex deals where they're answering questions or concerns or issues for potential for a buyer before the acquisition. And a lot of times that information is really super useful. And so I would hold a contest every couple times a year, like for a nice steak dinner or something that would get a salesperson's attention, and say, we're going to, if you have a follow-up letter that has a great issue in it that we're able to use for a blog post, we're going to award a steak dinner to the best one or something like that, and run it for a fixed period of time. So you really want to, the salespeople they know the product, they know your customers better than most marketers do. And so if you can kind of get them with them, get that information, collect that data, that's a lot of free feedback for what people are asking about, the issues that are stopping or slowing down sales or the velocity of sales. This is priceless information.
That's so true. Because one of the things that you hear a lot, right, is this whole idea of use customer success or support things as blog posts, but people don't think about like what are sales hearing before people ever get to the necessity of support, right? So like that's a get out there ahead of what you're really looking for kind of a situation, as opposed to, like I'm going to wait until somebody actually has had the problem and then fix it, which is great too. But like, let's try to first, like, how do we even get them in the door? Mm-hmm. When we're talking about discussing like what's going on with sales, one of the things I think that, we're overlooking with both sales and support things in terms of marketing content is, what are they doing that works, right? Like when something goes right and when they answer a question or concern really well, what did they say? Like I want to know specifically what their email said, because I either want to use similar verbiage, I want to like mimic their explanation style. I want to understand what keywords or concepts they really like attached onto. And so one of the things that I've actually done, because we actually have, like technical support here that's made up of engineering team members. And a lot of times when a customer has like a complex question and they answer something really well, I go back and I look at them like, how can I actually create some kind of material or something that I can send, because they did a really good job at breaking something down that really worked well for somebody in answering a question. And like, it's already written, like you didn't have to make it up. Somebody already did it. Just figure out a way to put it in your own, in your new kind of marketing content. And I mean, if they did a really great job at writing it out in an email, not only can you kind of save it as an email template or make a blog post about it, you can use it as like something that you could use for advertising. You could make a video quick explainer, like a 2-minute, walkthrough on it.
Those are all great ideas. I think that those are perfect. One thing I think that you should, as a marketer, what you really want to get to is creating a marketing dashboard. And there are a lot of ways to go about this. One way is to understand what to try to collect data that is important to your CFO and your CMO and your CEO, and understand what are the metrics they're really looking to move at. And they're going to be things around dollars and sales and that kind of stuff. And if you can collect information from the data that you have, even if you're using like an Excel spreadsheet to pull this data in, that's a good place to start. Additional information that you might want to have as you're starting to collect, and like using an Excel spreadsheet, and there are lots of free templates out there. So a business intelligence template or marketing intelligence dashboard, just Google those, you'll find free templates. But you can start collecting that data, which is really helpful. The other data you might start collecting is like, think about, what are your business objectives? What are you going to do with that data? What is the data actionable? And this is something that a lot of people, really a lot of marketers and companies collect massive amounts of data because they're pretty charts and all kinds of numbers, and it's huge, and most of it's not actionable, or they look for 2 or 3. The dirty secret is like most folks will look for 2 or 3 metrics within a huge report is the only data they're really looking for. And so you have to ask yourself, is the data I'm providing going to be helpful to me or to my boss? But at least know what your objectives are, what's important. And the other part is like, don't become a perfectionist. If you're sharing your reports with anybody else, or even just for yourself, don't become a perfectionist. Don't let it's not perfect. It's going to evolve, and you need to be open to it because the data changes constantly, and you need to be able to respond to that. And as you find out, part of looking at data is recognizing patterns. And so as you see that, you're going to organize data differently. So be flexible. And at the end of the day, you want to create a workable data strategy that's something you can master, familiarize with. Don't do something that's so complex that you can't get your arms around it first time out. Start simple and grow. Worst case, you can warehouse your data. So you're collecting all this data. Maybe you're not using all the data, but you're collecting it going back, so at least you have it. And as you evolve, then you go, oh, you know what? I'd love to correlate this data with this thing, and it might tell you something. So think about, as you start, don't be a perfectionist. Think about how it's going to make it workable, and understand how it's going to evolve to a dashboard that gives you some useful information they can also share with your bosses and your boss's boss.
Such a good reminder too about like not needing to be a perfectionist and kind of getting everything together, because that does like slow a lot of people down and stop a lot of people from getting involved, as they're like, well, it's not going to be great, so like I'm not even going to try, and all these other things. So I think that this actually kind of jumps into one of the hacks that I was going to bring up, which is people probably are already, as you mentioned, collecting a ton of data. And like the thing that happens all the time is, hey, I've got all this data. And then people are like, oh, like don't bring something up if you don't have anything to do with it, right? Like if you told somebody, this happened, like, and we have this massive statistic, like, but you don't have any way of like figuring out how or what to do next and all these different things. So like look for what you can make actionable. As you mentioned, the other thing that's kind of my hack is use other departments' reports. So for example, if you see this like massive spike in customer support tickets, and you get these reports, be like, what happened? Like, why are so many people having a support problem right now? Can we make materials that will help solve some of this and increase retention? Or you see sales stuff like, oh, sales had like a massive, closing month. Like, what's going on? Like, how did they close? Like, what was it that contributed to that? Or, different things. Use other people's already collected data, and then look for, as you mentioned, patterns that you can say, hey, like something's going on in this other department. What can I either do to like leverage that information or to help make it better and be the rock star that helps the entire company succeed? Yeah.
And just as part of that, I think something that most people don't do, and they really should. I know a lot of CMOs who actually do this, but really understanding your customers is so key. And like for any given product, what I like to do, if there's enough data there, depending, some products don't have that many customers, but I like to pull out the last 100 sales for a particular product and look at it, and what are groupings within that data? What are industries, company sizes, titles of buyers? Are there some kind of logical groupings that I can kind of tease out of those last 100 customers? More if you have it, less if you don't have 100, as many as you got, you can at least make some educated guesses on that stuff. The other thing,
And
which
like
I would,
what feature, right? Like, or what specific thing made them be like, I want that. You know, like what were they looking for? What were those people looking for?
well, I think that would be perfect for like, I think that, and this is a little delicate, you have to develop relationship sales, but I think interviewing customers, closed business, is awesome. Your salesperson is going to want to be there and know what the questions are you're going to ask, and you'll have to kind of walk gently with that with closed business. But that's a good place to ask those kinds of questions. Kind of what what are the other competition they looked at? What do they like about the competition? What do they like about your product? What do they like about the competition less? What do they like about your product less? Those kinds of questions. You want them open-ended questions, and you don't want to like skew the results, but you want to ask these questions. You want to do it directly and be able to have that conversation, because you
Well,
want
and
to be able to,
hopefully, if they're like a lead, right, then you would know what content they had kind of consumed prior to close. So hopefully, if you're doing content grouping, you actually have them in a bucket that says like, these are the types of features that they were looking at when they were still a prospect and stuff like that. So hopefully, going into a conversation with them, you would have some of that information at hand, so you can actually then ask deeper questions. You don't have to jump off like with the basics of why. You can jump off with, it seemed like these were the things that you were looking at, or like it seemed like this was the solution you were looking for. You know, like, can you tell us specifically when you were looking at our content how we addressed that in a way that really spoke to you?
yeah, and even like going a little further with that. I mean, like I think that this is something that people almost nobody does, and it's really sad, is doing lost business interviews. And so, because every time there's a lost deal, no, I mean, everyone's embarrassed, everyone hates it. They, they're frustrated, whatever. They lost the deal, and so they move on, right? That's what salespeople do. They take abuse all day long and they move on. And so, what you really want to do is you want to go find who those folks lost business and try to reach out to them and see if you can have a conversation with them. And I would probably try to do it. I wouldn't necessarily say you're calling from XYZ company. You might say that you're calling for XYZ company doing an anonymous follow-up survey or something like that, so people don't feel put on the spot. No one will ever be honest with you if you ask directly. So if you can kind of give it an arm's length, or even hire or have an intern, or not intern, but have hire someone to do it, or some other group to asking these questions. Find out why you lost business. And the other thing we should be doing in tandem with all these things, you're looking at all the closed business to understand who these people are kind of demographically. You're ideally doing some follow-up interviews with this closed business. You're doing interviews with lost business, which is something that's gold. That's millions of dollars worth of research for you right there. And the other thing which you should be doing is sales ride-alongs. And this is something, this basically, again, you got to take salespeople to lunch, get to know them, and say, I'd really like to go on a sales call with you. And they can just introduce you. They don't have to introduce you as somebody from marketing. They say, this is my teammate so-and-so, and we're here together, and they can just be kind of a quiet associate. And so there's ways to actually go along and get to know this, do these things. And you should be doing sales ride-alongs. I'd say do 10 or 20 of these a year, because I think it's that important. Go to industry events. So these are all things that you should be doing to get a better hold of the facts about who your customers are, not just through a couple simple surveys, but actually some empirical research as you go out in the field.
The sales and marketing thing, we talk about this a lot. In every organization across a ton of different industries that I've ever been in, sales always has their opinions and preconceived notions about marketing, and marketing always has their opinions about sales and like what a salesperson is, and like, such and such sales guy. And they're all like, oh, well, marketing. So, we all do this, but what's funny is, and one of the common complaints I hear from marketers about salespeople is like, they're kind of douchey and like stupid, and, like they all sound the same, and it's really annoying, and sales guys are annoying. The funny thing about it is, if they're a good salesperson, and you probably want to talk to the good ones in your organization, they're closing business. So they're doing something. So that at the end of the day, the thing that we're probably forgetting, that we all always forget, is that we're too close, right? We're too close to it. we hear about this product all the time. We work in this industry. We've been here forever. We like hear the same spiel. We write marketing copy all the time. And so we naturally are a little sensitive to it. But we forget that advertising, marketing, and sales make billions and billions of dollars every year, and that people actually do respond to this when it's not their industry, right? Like, if it didn't work, it wouldn't be working, and we wouldn't all be employed. So I think that sometimes you have to take yourself kind of away from the fact that like this is your industry and you think it's stupid and you hate this copy. You know, like I'll look at different things that, you know, that I've even done for, you know, Ginza, and or I'll look at other people's copy and I'm like, God, this is so lame. But then I look at it and like the click-through rates are amazing and like people are totally responding. And like I sent out this email a couple weeks ago and I was like, this email sucks. And I got like 4 demo requests after I sent out this email, and I was just like, like things that I think are a little silly sometimes aren't silly, right? Because like I have to take myself, because I'm not the audience, right? Like I built the platform, like I help work on this, I deal with it, it's like my baby. So I'm not the audience for this. And I think that a lot of times when we're talking to salespeople or salespeople are talking to marketing people, we all kind of like get into our corners and get into these kind of like, this person is this way, but guess what? What they're doing works, or they wouldn't be doing it. So
yeah, I love sales. Yeah, I love salespeople. I think you need to understand as a marketer, it's a little bit like a car. You know, they're driving the car, right? They're closing the deal. And as a marketer, you're trying to make the best car possible, the best engine possible. And marketers may not, the salespeople, you know, they're driving the car, so they don't know about marketing. They tend to look at things like, yeah, we need better tires or some kind of generic thing, because they don't really have the strategic wherewithal, but they do know it works. And so as a marketer, you have to listen to what they say and then translate that into strategy that's scalable and makes sense given what you're doing. And the other thing which I think people should be doing is industry research. And I think this directly goes back to kind of what we're doing is in terms of marketing data and business intelligence for marketing activities. And Google Alerts is free. They killed it for a while and they brought it back, and it's a really good source. Google Alerts, it's free. You can go set up alerts to track your industry. You know, so what's going on, what's the latest developments in your industry. You can track that. You can also look for mentions of your brand or your industry generally, or competitors. And these are all these sets, you can set all these searches up. And if you do it correctly in Google Alerts, you don't. One of the options is to have it mailed to you every time there's an update or a daily update or a weekly update. You can have it mailed to you. And I would actually do an RSS feed. And Google says RSS feed, and you can do it as it happens. And then you can run that RSS feed into Feedly. So all the blogs you're tracking for, you know, via RSS. Feedly is an ISS reader. It's like a little mail reader if you haven't used it. And there are a couple. Feedly is probably the easiest one to do. Put the RSS address in there and you plug it in, and every time there's a new update from that, from the alert or from one of your blogs, you got to read it in a nice little reader. Very handy to do. And it's a way to stay up on the industry and your competition and mentions. And it's super smart. You should be at least doing this kind of thing that you can look into daily or every other day and see, did my competitor get mentioned? Is there a news story here that I missed out on? So there's a lot of great data with that. And so Google Alerts, using an RSS function and then running the RSS function into an RSS reader like Feedly.
Totally. I actually have, so I've had Google Alerts set up for forever. And I think that, so one of the things that I did that helps me out is I have certain things that come to me as it happens, right? Like things that I really want to know about. And then I have other things rolled up into like daily and weekly digests, because I know that like, it's just going to be too much.
Exactly.
But the thing that's really great, you know, as you mentioned, kind of like putting it in Feedly or something, one of the things that I do sometimes is I actually do a kind of a quick scan and I mine it for content ideas. Like, are there a lot of people talking about a lot of specific things, especially if they're talking to my competitors about those specific things and I'm nowhere in here and I don't have any content that matches any of that? I'm like, what am I doing? Like, they're talking to my competitors about the specific thing over and over and over again, and I don't have any content about it. I should probably like make a video, write a blog post, do a slide share, like, you know, get off my duff and do something good, you know, that, because this is obviously a thing people are talking about. And the things that's great about Google Alerts is it's what's happening right now, right? Like, so it's not just everything from Google pulled in ever. It's stuff that's showing up in news and like changing now. So it is kind of like of the moment. Another kind of, you know, hack, well, internal data gathering and idea gathering thing is one of the things that marketers and internal people have always hated about sales, but you're really looking at it wrong. You gotta like just think about it smartly, because they're gonna keep doing this regardless of how you feel about it. So you might as well take what they're doing and leverage it. Is sales people will promise people things in order to close a deal. They'll be like, yeah, sure, we could totally build that. Or like, oh yeah, like that'll happen. Here's the thing. They're going to do it regardless. But the thing that you can do with that information is, if you see them keep promising people the same thing over and over and over again, it means you're missing a feature or core functionality that somebody else has, because people keep asking for it. And then you're obviously not marketing against it, right? Like if people keep asking for it and your salespeople keep promising it to people, then obviously it's something that they're hearing about regularly in the industry, and you need to take note, not just from a product standpoint, but from a messaging standpoint, because they keep getting asked about it. So you're not going to change the leopard spots, right? So what you need to figure out how to do is like, how do you make the leopard like do something good for what you need?
How do you skin that leopard?
And then make a really cute coat out of it.
There's actually a tool that I also like. This is kind of an easy hack, but there's a website called SimilarWeb, SIMILARWEB. SimilarWeb is actually, they basically collect, it's kind of like the low-end version of against the metrics, I guess.
Cool.
It basically tells you, kind of talks about kind of where traffic's coming from and geography, and it basically estimates traffic and basic things. And so just as a place to get started, it's a good tool. It's not probably it's not going to be very robust, but at least you can look at your website compared to a competitor at a very basic level. And so you can track kind of like how much traffic are they getting compared to you, and again, this is mostly guesstimates based on some different data sources, but at least it gives you a baseline about where you are compared to your competitors.
Totally. I mean, and so I know that we're running out of time for today. So the thing that I wanted to touch on, and, you know, like obviously you'll need to be able to make your closing statements too, is that nothing I've said today about like looking at content or grouping things or like looking at what people are and aren't using or anything is in any way, shape, or form a call for you to go get rid of content that people aren't using frequently, or to like only focus on the groups or things that you see being used right now constantly. Because here's the thing that we always point out, right? Content is part of an ecosystem. And also, you know, what you may have is a group of really well-performing content, and the thing that's performing the lowest is actually still performing really well. It's just not performing the best, but it's still really good material. So when you're doing this stuff, the recommendation shouldn't be, well, these 10 things are doing really well and these 10 things aren't. So like, screw those 10 things. Let's stop messing with that and let's only do this. You have to understand the connectivity and interwovenness of like how all that stuff actually worked together to achieve a goal, because it may have been that people hop, skipped, and jumped through some of that other stuff and got to that other piece. So getting rid of it will actually lose you the path. So that's kind of my closing thing, is like, none of this is a call to arms to like get rid of certain data that you've collected or types of content that you've been working on or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that the two things I would share kind of in closing is Google tools. It really, as a marketer, you should understand Google Analytics. You should understand Google Keyword Planner and Google Webmaster Tools. Now, you may not be in charge of that stuff, but it's really, there's a lot of really good information in all those places. It's about how people are what people are finding on your website, what they're reading on your website, how Google sees your listing and your website. This is huge data, and this, you know, organic has to be a part of any strategy to keep lead costs lower. So as a marketer, if you're full hands-on, you should be all over Google tools. If you're just a smart marketer and you have other people doing some of this stuff for you, you should completely understand it and be familiar with the tools and be able to use them with those folks. And then the last little thing is really about, and this is kind of a throwaway, but you know, we all have the signatures. And I think signatures are one of the usually the most on the bottom of an email. Signatures usually often is not very standardized in a company, and here's a great opportunity for you to promote all your content, you know, like your latest blog post or your latest ebook or that kind of thing. But something, a throwaway, is you can put surveys on there. So you can actually put a survey on the bottom of signatures, but also on autoresponder. So, for instance, let's say you have a sign up, a blog post sign up, and they sign up, and the thank you page comes up and says thank you for yourself. You'll be getting our new blog. You can actually put a little opportunity for a survey in there, using SurveyMonkey or whatever, and ask and offer them maybe another download or some asset to do it. But ask them questions that you want to know about. What kinds of features are they using in the industry? These have to be not so much about your product, but about your industry area. And because people who are reading your blog may not be buying your tool then or have that tool right then, but they're interested in your area. So you need to ask industry-related stuff, but you can get a better idea about what kinds of content they really are going to find important, who your readers really are. There's all kinds of questions you use. So like, either in your email signature or in your autoresponder thank you page, add a survey. Easy to do.
Surveys are their best. Like, seriously, I wish people took them more, but any chance that you get to ask somebody a direct question and get some immediate feedback is a solid win. And even if you don't get very many responses, like every response you get is somebody's like from their mouth to your ears reply, and you better listen. The worst thing that I think you can do, and this is actually a danger, like this is a caveat, and you may disagree, don't send out surveys or ask people how they feel about something if you're not prepared to do something about it once you get it, because then it just seems like you're being a jerk, right? Unless you put it in there, right? Unless you put in there like, hey, like we're just collecting this information for shits and giggles. Like, don't ask, especially when you're doing this with customers, right? Don't ask people what features would you like to see in the product, get a bunch of people to respond back and tell you exactly what they want and then ignore it. Especially like, and you don't necessarily have to build it. The thing that you should be prepared to do, though, is respond back and explain the path forward after you just ask these questions. So I think that's the caveat with asking people questions or sending out surveys, not just like obviously like intra email, like, snippet surveys and things like that. There's actually like satisfaction survey things too. And I feel like the funny part about that is people always, like the thing that'll just ask you like, how do you feel about this? Like, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, at the end. And it's like always, if you actually have the wherewithal to click on something, it's always because you're pissed off. And so it's always like frowny face, frowny face. I would also say like steer away from those kinds of things, because you're probably not going to get real information. You're just going to get people's like of the moment. So I think you're totally right in ask industry related questions.
Yeah. I like your point about making sure that, this is, I think it's true for external or internal. When you ask people's advice to things like, talk about how you're going to use that data. Make sure you thank them for that data. Ask follow-up questions if there's anything about that, and say, listen, this is great data. We're going to be talking about all these things coming up, and we're going to be including your response. So thank you very much, because people do want to know that their time is valuable. And if they spend 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes answering questions for you, that's a gift. That's a gift that they're giving you, and you have to honor that.
Totally. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Steve, thank you so much for joining. I will talk to you guys again soon, and look for this show on the ginzametrics.com website, on our YouTube channel, YouTube/Ginzametrics. And we also always put it on our Twitter feed as well as the Facebook page. So you can find us there, and feel free to always email Erin at ginzametrics.com with any questions or comments that you have, future show topics, or guests you'd like to see. Until next week, bye.